Denver police try and walk back the warm welcome they gave to right-wing extremists who came downtown to fight anarchists. Colorado's new police accountability law has loopholes, depending on where those officers work. Our state's COVID-19 numbers keep moving in the right direction. That thing your aunt sent you on Facebook about the CDC admitting coronavirus isn't a big deal, it's garbage. We'll explain. And after a fire rips through Glenwood Canyon, and a next viewer asks about the famous flag that's flown there for generations. Oh, say, does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave? We found out. Next. Denver police have kept anarchist violence and property damage to a minimum in recent weeks because, for one reason, in all honesty, there aren't that many of those troublemakers. There's like a couple dozen. Until last Friday, DPD could also focus its attention solely on that one group out to cause mayhem. Well, now there are right-wing militia members spoiling for a fight against the anarchists in Denver. After Denver police first welcomed and thanked the militia for coming into the city, DPD tells our Steve Steger they don't want them around.
Our camera stayed on the other side of the street.
We really want you guys to just disengage and go back to your cars. But
a Colorado Public Radio reporter had his audio recorder rolling near this group that appears to be a militia group. You can see what appear to be holstered weapons on some of them, even zip ties, presumed to be used as handcuffs. Kevin's recorder caught audio of a Denver police officer engaging them.
Appreciate you coming here and giving us support.
Yeah, I think, my reaction was right on Denver police.
Denver Public Safety Director Murphy Robinson says there's nothing wrong with that tape. This officer was only de-escalating the situation.
He acknowledged their presence. He then asked them to demobilize and to leave.
And they did.
I can see how the optic could be inflaming.
Denver Police Division Chief Ron Thomas admits there is a perception problem, though, both to anti-police protesters and to the militia itself.
Do you worry, though, that this sends a message to that group that thank you for coming out and that they might take this as a sign that you're in support of what they were doing?
Yeah, I do believe that that's a problem. And again, that's why we would like them to stay home.
They want them to stay home because around the country, when these militias show up, situations tend to become more violent. 3 people across the country died last week after protesters clashed.
We don't need them to help us, defend, the city facilities.
The anarchist violence, while condemned, is relatively predictable for police. When you mix in other groups, Thomas says, the predictability goes out the window. Both Thomas and Robinson say the city's message to both sides is pretty simple. If you want to be peaceful, come on down.
Anyone that wants to cause damage, anyone that wants to cause violence in the city and county of Denver, you're not welcome here.
Now, DPD says the folks from the anti-police group were actually picking up objects and throwing them at them, and that's why they had to use force and then start to push them away. And while they were dispersing that group, they say they were pushing this militia group in a different direction so these groups don't interact. Kyle, I've witnessed this on the streets before. When you've got these two groups with very differing opinions, Denver police tends to get right in the middle so they can't even get at each other in the first place.
Mm-hmm. And Steve, this is a dynamic, as you mentioned, has played out in a number of other cities. And recently we've seen deaths in Wisconsin, deaths in Oregon, where the addition of an extra group and weapons makes the situation particularly volatile. And we've seen deaths result.
Absolutely. And the thought is that with the city condemning this group, their hope is that they stay away, that they know that the police say, we've got this handled, we can take care of this. The question is, will that message go through to them, or will they listen to other outside forces who say things are a little crazy and they need their support there to stop these violent protests?
All right. Thank you, Steve. So we've talked quite a bit about Colorado's new state law that's designed to increase accountability for law enforcement. From body cameras to the use of force, there is a lot in this law. Even when police get sued for hurting somebody, changes the rules for that. Now, you might have thought from the way we're talking about it that every officer in the state is subject to the new rules. Jeremy Hahola from our 9 Wants to Know team found that's not true.
It's the only way we're going to restore the broken trust.
A big deal for a big bill that Democrats and Republicans actually agreed on.
Strip the immunity that law enforcement has when they kill us.
With the signing of the new Enhanced Law Enforcement Integrity Bill, local cops in Colorado can now be held personally liable when they get sued for excessive force in state court. That's if they acted in bad faith, knowing what they were doing was wrong. An officer can be forced to pay up to $25,000 out of his own funds.
We've seen time and time again people's rights being violated, sometimes ending in death.
Hold on. You may think every cop in Colorado is now part of this. Nope. When lawmakers made this law, they exempted loads of state officers, from Colorado State Patrol to corrections officers. How did that come to be, and why is that?
There is a qualified immunity piece that is taken out for certain state employees.
Getting an exact answer from the main sponsor of the bill, Democrat Leslie Herod, took some time.
I can't speak to why or why not the state was included or not included in 217, the conversation about the fiscalness of 217. But what I can say is that we had two bills, one that addressed one issue, one that addressed another concern. I voted yes for both.
Finally, I made the connection to this other bill she's talking about. The Colorado Rights Act was a bill introduced by Republican Matt Soper that would have removed qualified immunity for all police, including state cops. Soper's bill was introduced and died, partially because lawmakers feared it would open up state agencies to more expensive litigation. The bill's failure influenced how Herod and other sponsors crafted the bill that eventually passed, causing them to exempt state cops.
Well, the votes weren't there, so we had to make sure that there were votes in every single component of the bill.
So while the state is worried about its own funds, a group that represents local cities and towns in Colorado is saying, hey, what about us?
Is the state being hypocritical here?
Hypocritical is tough talk. I would say that the state has an opportunity in the 2021 session to work on leveling the playing field.
Boulder County Sheriff Joe Pelly is with the County Sheriffs of Colorado. He believes the state did not think this through for all law enforcement.
We all want accountability. We all want transparency. That ought to be applied across the board.
I asked Herod if she would support a change to the law to include state officers.
And I would vote to support that effort moving forward, 100%.
For Next, Jeremy Hohola, 9 News.
So that law moved through the Capitol really quickly in June during the pandemic session and also with all the protests in the streets. We know that that bill requires police to wear body cameras by the year 2023. Provision applies to most of the state patrol. It does exempt the state patrol's executive detail, folks who protect the governor. Colorado's COVID-19 hospitalizations appear to be leveling off after they steadily declined for weeks. 148 patients at last check. Our 7-day average of hospitalizations is just under 140 patients. It's down from where it was a week ago. The percentage of COVID-19 tests that come back positive has dropped under 2% in the day-to-day measure. That's really good. Yesterday's was at 1.96%. 7-day moving average for positivity, 2.66%. Down from the prior 2 weeks. It is the latest fad taking over the interwebs. And by fad, I mean an incredibly gross mischaracterization of the truth. Maybe you saw it. Hopefully you didn't share it. It's the claim that the Centers for Disease Control is admitting it's overblown, this whole COVID-19 thing. Our Chris Vanderveen is ready to inoculate us with some truth.
Maybe you saw it too. CDC lying. Only 6% of reported COVID deaths are real. Can we go back to normal now?
And I've seen this again and again. It's Monday. It's another conspiracy of the week, right?
Dr. Leon Kelly is, as his name implies, a doctor. That means he knows more about death certificates than, well, let's say, that random dude with more numbers in his name than letters.
You have some expertise in this area, do you not?
I'm a board-certified forensic pathologist, and I've signed out or overseen the signing of literally tens of thousands of death certificates in my career.
He says if you shared this nonsense, you're telling the world, hey, look at me, I'm dumb.
It's either a direct misrepresentation of how you do a death certificate, or they just don't know what they're talking about.
Here's why. Yes, the CDC did report for 6% of the deaths, COVID-19 was the only cause listed on the death certificate. But that doesn't mean COVID had nothing to do with the other 94% of reported deaths.
Fortunately, most people don't have to read death certificates all day. They certainly will never read their own. And so they don't have to worry about how you feel about or what they look like.
But he does. And see there, death certificates have multiple lines for the cause of death. People who get COVID, for example, often develop pneumonia, which then leads to respiratory failure, which then leads to the need for a death certificate. Did COVID have nothing to do with the death? Of course not. What about diabetics or people with heart disease or asthma? What happens when they get COVID-19?
The likelihood of you dying or having severe consequences increases when you have other diseases in other organs.
So does COVID have nothing to do with those deaths? 6%ers apparently think so. And Dr. Kelly says it's time to start ignoring those people along with everyone else peddling COVID garbage on the internet.
When we look back on this and we do our lessons learned, I think as a country, one of the things we can take away from this is science literacy.
Good thought. Thanks, Doc. For next, this is, well, me, the journalist. Bye.
Dr. Kelly said close to half the population has some sort of chronic disease, putting them at increased risk for serious COVID complications. It's more than 100 million of our fellow Americans. Did the fire in Glenwood Canyon destroy a longtime landmark of patriotism?
Our business, interestingly, has exploded. Our industry is absolutely on fire. The market is insane.
If you're wondering what people are doing with their free time during the pandemic, we might have found it. Next. $19,000. You beautiful people contributed $19,000, bit more than that, for Colorado Youth for a Change. That was last week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign. Just wanted to update you on your generous support of that nonprofit. They're the specialists who go in when kids drop out of school. They convince them to go back, get the support that they need, and graduate. That nonprofit has doubled its team to deal with the students who are going to end up walking away from remote learning this year. Your generous donations mean that even more seniors are going to be walking across the stage or doing whatever they do when graduation rolls around at the end of this school year. So, if you got another $5 in your pocket, bring it back on Wednesday. I think I've got another great idea for us.
We're saying goodbye to August with a little snow above 11,000 feet and possibly some rain for Denver tonight after a day with highs very comfortable in the 70s and 80s. We'll see these numbers again tomorrow with the arrival of a second front tonight, already generating showers over the higher terrain and in the fire zones. We're also watching the lightning and the wind. Second round of showers comes through Denver after the dinner hour between 9 and midnight. And then once that band moves through, we clear out. We go mostly sunny tomorrow, and then temperatures start to warm as we move toward the middle part of the week. Showers tonight, then clearing, low 51. Tomorrow with sunshine, a high near 80. We do go warmer on Wednesday, cooler Thursday, and then 90s for the first part of the weekend, and a beautiful forecast for Sunday and the holiday on Monday.
Tonight's next question comes from Brenda. Firefighters getting more of a hold on the Grizzly Creek fire in Glenwood Canyon, and Brenda wants to know if the famous flag atop the canyon wall still stands. Remember we took you up there last fall. Noah Brennan and photojournalist Ann Herbst, they made that hard hike along with the guys who first placed that flag back in 1968. Steve Kibler and Mike Paddock wanted a way to be remembered before they shipped off to Vietnam. Every year since, at least one of them hikes back up there to replace the weather-beaten flag with a new one. And it still stands after the Grizzly Creek fire. Steve told us that the burn area was not actually all that close to the spot where the flag can be seen, and the routes that they used to get up there, those are fine too. So they're going to continue to replace that flag once a year, so long, they told us, as they're physically able to get up and back. A classic pastime is making a comeback during this pandemic. Meaningful human conversation. No, I'm just kidding. No, this is something that you can still do alone.
Within the past couple of weeks, we just saw a Mike Trout card sell for $3.9 million.
That's more than Mike Trout made in his first 5 years in baseball. Some rich stuff. Next. I think a lot of us have found that we have a bit of extra time on our hands during this pandemic when we aren't able to do some of the things that we used to love to do. Some have picked up an old hobby. Here's Byron Reed.
All of this is full of cards.
For CEO Brian Drent,
Everything's vintage in here, too.
collecting sports memorabilia started when he was a teenager.
You know, it kind of started out just from setting up at small baseball card shows in high school, then throughout college. This is a 1968 Mickey Mantle game-used jersey.
Drent is the founder and CEO of Mile High Card Company.
It's the 1909 T206 Honus Wagner card.
A group that auctions and sells high-grade vintage sports relics.
I played sports growing up, so it's really my passion, and it's great to be able to do what you love to do every day.
His Castle Pines-based company hosts auctions 4 times a year, including an auction that wraps up this week. Drent says it's their largest auction to date.
We're seeing at least double the amount of interest, the amount of bids in our auction.
He says business has been booming for the past few months.
I've never seen it quite like this.
Since the COVID-19 pandemic hit, creating record-breaking bids for sports collectibles.
Within the past couple of weeks, we just saw a Mike Trout card sell for $3.9 million. They have connectivity through their phone, through their iPad, through their laptop, and they've refound their collections.
Collectors like Denver's Marshall Fogel,
It's like Babe Ruth spat, Lou Gehrig spat.
who's been collecting rare sports memorabilia for the past 30 years.
There's items you can enjoy because it's a collectible and it's a profitable venture as well.
Both agree people are possibly looking for more ways to collect sports items.
This is a Michael Jordan game-used jersey.
During a time when passions can become so much more than hobbies.
Those are now tangible assets, so we're seeing a surge in interest as well as the prices.
For Next, I'm Byron Reed.
A Next viewer has found Colorado's most bizarre grocery store sign. That and your never at all bizarre feedback next. It's a sign that Palisade peaches have a run for their money because Palisade peaches, those all just taste like peaches. But according to the sign at the King Supers on Hamden, peaches come in assorted flavors. Nancy, get in here, try this peach. It tastes like barbecue sauce. So this sign is great news for people who have always wanted a peach but don't like the taste of peaches. Our viewer Sandy spotted this sign, made her laugh, so she sent it our way. If you see a sign anywhere in Colorado that makes you smile or look twice, send it our way and we'll share it here. And feedback, Jeff writes in and says, your lead-in tonight was the right-wing extremists confronting anarchists. If you're fairly going to call the extremists right-wing, why don't you label the anarchists left-wing? That's a really good question. There are absolutely leftists in that crowd that have been causing trouble. Whether or not it's fair to call anarchists leftists is actually kind of a really interesting political discussion. A lot of them are. Just Google, are anarchists leftists? Here's your rabbit hole for tonight. Good night.